So thank you everybody for joining us today for our community conversation this Monday. My name is Shanya Johnson. I'm our Learning and Development Manager over at Operation Kindness, and I am joined by...
Hey y'all, I'm Lucy Fernandez. I am the Senior Intake Diversion Program Manager or Positive Alternatives to Shelter Surrender Program Manager at Austin Pets Alive.
Ooh, you do so much, Lucy.
The long
And we are
card.
excited to host a call today with the amazing Kassidi Jones. Kassidi graduated with distinction from Yale University in the departments of African American Studies and English. Her dissertation, Our Share of Summers, Tending the Environment in 19th Century Black American Poetry, won the departmental prize for Best Dissertation of the Year from 2024 to 2025. In 2020, Kassidi started the Instagram account Ginger Naps. If you haven't, definitely follow that, which focuses on the intersections of Black American history and dogs. And it addresses racism in the present day in pet industry. She works in the Black Research Library in New York City, but lives in Connecticut with the light of her life, Ginger Douglas Jones. So we are so excited to have you here, Kassidi. And we will go ahead and give you the floor in just a bit. That way you can do a personal introduction of your own and let everyone know anything that they need to know. Sounds good? Perfect. All right. Let me minimize my screen here. Question of the day, Lucy. Did you want to kick us off? And I'll put it in the chat for everyone as well.
Lucy, you're on mute.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank y'all so much. Like I said, the interface is a little bit different than the laptop I'm used to using. So thank y'all so much for your patience and just for showing up, because that's half the battle in the world right now. What is the name of one organization near you that you feel is doing equitable work within the community? So what is the name of an organization near you that you feel is doing equitable work in the community? Right now, there's a lot of obvious inequity, and it's never stopped. It's just obviously becoming way more like surfaced and everything. So just kind of paying homage to those local folks in the community, whether it's animal related or human specific organizations that are just doing the work, and that's again part of the battle, showing up and doing the work. So any of those local organizations, national organizations that you work with that you feel are kind of showing up and showing out to provide equitable support to those that need it. Again, could be fur baby related or human related, but just kind of giving shout outs to those local organizations and agencies.
And
So
is there anyone that wants to unmute and potentially tell us?
yeah.
You can also post it in the chat.
I'll jump in. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for doing this. I have to shout out at a Los Angeles organization called CHIRLA, the Coalition for Immigrant Rights in Los Angeles. And they have they have a lot of free resources available. And they also have Know Your Rights trainings available, Train the Trainer trainings, which I attended, which were really helpful to be able to provide support to other community members. So I highly recommend them.
Thank you, Allison. I've gone ahead and dropped that URL in the chat if anyone wants to check them out. I agree. There's a lot of things that are happening in our world right now. So feel free to share resources. Hop on Maddie's pet forum and share any resources that you were able to find. That way we can all kind of rely on each other during this time to navigate some of these difficult situations that we are being placed in. So yeah. All right, Lucy. Keep posting those answers in the chat. We are going to jump over just to make sure we can give Kassidi as much time as possible. We will open the floor now for national updates. If you have anything going on within your organization, now is the time to share. Feel free to unmute and share your updates with the group. We do ask that you keep your updates to about a minute or so, so that way we can have time for the rest of the program. So do we have any national updates today?
I can update. It's Elke from Haas. Hi, everybody. We recently published social services kit toolkit, and it's on our website, and I will put the link in the chat. And basically, about a couple of months ago, we went to 3 locations, 3 communities: Kent County, Michigan, Lynchburg, Virginia, and Hayes County, Texas, where we put together a roundtable with some human social services. And basically, we threw together a great comprehensive toolkit checklist. Like, here's, if you want to do it in your community, here's the reasons why, here's how to do it, here's lessons learned. So feel free to jump on our website and check it out. And of course, if you have any questions, you can reach out to us. Thanks so much.
I have veterans in my family, so everything that they're doing to
Thank
dismount,
you,
I can
Elke.
see.
Anybody else? Okay, feel free to again post those in the chat. As you can post it in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever works. You have a great community here to help support your cause. So if there's any way that anyone on this call can help you, post it in the chat or onto Maddie's Pet Forum. I will go ahead and again throw in my own shameless plug from my org, because that's what I do. We just finished up our conference this May. We will be opening our speaker proposal soon for Texas Unites. I know it says Texas in the name, but you can come from anywhere and all over. Our speaker proposals are opening. So if you have something that you're doing at your organization that you feel is great and you want other people to know about it so that they can replicate it, feel free to reach out to me. I will post my email in the chat as well. Okay. Well, that's it for national updates. Sorry, I'm pulling back up my agenda. Am I the only person that has like 22 windows open? I'm sorry. Okay, Lucy, I'll pass it over to you. Would you like to go ahead and kick it off and pass it over to Kassidi?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you pretty much summed it up, a lot of it, with Ms. Kassidi Jones, and all of her exceptional work in the space of equity and pet ownership, and um, the sometimes the very not apparent to like most people, but I think it's so wonderful to highlight these things that may not be common sense to a lot of folks. And I really admire and respect the work that Cassidy's doing. And also shout out to a fellow Yankee. I grew up in Connecticut as well. So so I'll give you the floor. Miss Kassidi Jones, take it away.
Thank you. I call myself a kinetic cutie, but I'll take Yankee. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Good afternoon. It's afternoon for me. Good afternoon and good morning to everyone. And thank you for coming. This is a lot of people. And thank you to the folks at, oh, I didn't share my screen. Thank you to the folks at Maddie's Fund for having me.
Looks great.
Cool. I don't know where everything else went. There it is. Okay, we're back. Yeah, let's just get into it. I think the bio I was given was sufficient. There's not that much more to say, but I would like to know more about who all of you are. So if you're able to, please put the names of your pets in the chat and a few words about how you got them, how you came together. And there are a lot of different ways to be connected with a pet. Maybe you found them, maybe you adopted them, maybe you purchased them. But whatever your story is, I'd like to read it because my talk today is all about stories. And it's going to get weird and it's experimental and I hope you like it. All right. So as you heard in my intro, I recently graduated with a PhD in African American Studies and English from Yale. My dissertation was on 19th century Black American eco-poetics. And in it, I attempted to redirect the discourse about Black Americans' relationships with nature because I found that the discourse was a little too focused on trauma and tragedy. So I collected this body of poems that showed that Black folks had pleasurable and joyous encounters with the environment and with non-human animals as well. One of my chapters was exclusively about animals. There was a subsection on Black folks and dogs. And as I started uncovering more and more of that history that connected Black folks with dogs, I started sharing some of that history on an Instagram account called Ginger's Naps back in the fall of 2020. At the time, I did not know that pet Instagram was in the middle of a racial reckoning due to the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor that sparked international outrage. But I came in a heated moment. I joined the online pet community at a time when more people were starting to ask big questions about race and racism in the animal welfare industry. And I popped up with these little historical insights that connected issues the industry grappled with in the present to issues of the past. So that's how Ginger's Naps became Ginger's Naps, even though it started as a way for me to share pictures of my pandemic puppy with my mom. What I want to do with you all today is tell some stories, like I said. I'm going to try to tell you the story of my dog Ginger and I, as it is today. But then I'm going to plug Ginger and I from our present moment and context and place us in new contexts in different places and in different times to try to connect some of the dots that show how nearly impossible it was for Ginger and I to exist together here and now. The scenes that I'm going to invent for you today are not simple guesswork. These scenes are informed by rigorous and diligent research in the archives, the newly emerging scholarship combining the issues of race and dogs, and my experiences and conversations with other Black dog guardians. And that's a methodology called critical fabulation that the scholar Cydia Hartman came up with. If you've read Wayward Lies, Beautiful Experiments, it's a great book. If you haven't read, maybe pick it up. But in it, what she's trying to do is fill in gaps in the archive. Obviously, not everyone's stories are told equitably. Not everything is recorded equitably as well. So she does research to try to unearth these figures that have been buried by all of these colonial record-keeping practices and tell their stories as fully as she can based on the research that she did. So our first story starts in the present. It should be an easy one. As I was writing this talk, it was 2025. I was in Connecticut, sitting with my feet up on the couch. Ginger was fast asleep, tucked between my outstretched legs and the couch's back cushions. I was slightly distracted by the cute little twitches and grumbles Ginger makes as she dreams. I made a note to myself to remember to register Ginger in our new town, to refill her prescription for her allergy meds at Costco, and to double check when her next annual appointment is at the vet, who's located just over a mile away down the road. I'm working a new 9 to 5, so Ginger is spending most of her time at a sitter's house where she's very spoiled because, as usual, she quickly became her new sitter's favorite client. It's a trend. It's not me. This is what everyone else is saying. These are the reviews I'm getting. And of course, Ginger and I have our trials and tribulations, but all in all, it's a pretty cushy life. Now, if I were to pluck us from our present day in Connecticut context and place us still in the present day, but in the United Kingdom, there's a chance that I could be sitting with my feet up on the couch alone. Because earlier this year, the UK enacted a major dog breed ban that specifically banned XL bully dogs from England and Wales. Many people who already kept and loved XL bullies tried to speak out against this discriminatory act, but they were unfortunately unsuccessful. No one really knows for sure what breed Ginger is. I've had people assume that she's mixed with some kind of pity something. And I've heard people tell me they don't see pity in her at all. Usually the people that know a lot about dogs say that they don't see it at all. That's fine with me. But that distinction doesn't really matter because according to the UK government's website, whether your dog is a banned type depends on what it looks like rather than its breed or name. And that means in this context, my life with Ginger would completely hinge on what some stranger sees when they look at her. And given that a 2012 study found that people correctly guessed a dog's major breed classifications based on visual inspection, only 25% of the time. And a Maddie Spun study from the same year came to the same conclusion, where only half of the dogs labeled pit bulls by shelter staff had actual pit bull DNA in their signatures. So that visual inspection is really unreliable. And yet my life with Ginger would be entirely dependent on it. So there's another timeline, another reality wherein I was writing that story at home by myself in the UK because Ginger got excited when greeting someone outside and was destroyed because a cop, a judge, or some other untrained professional thought that her head was just a little bit too square to desert. For the next vignette, it's also a story. This is about Ginger and I coming together in Philadelphia in the year 2020. At this point, we haven't met, but I'm preparing to adopt my very first dog in anticipation of passing my comprehensive exams in September. In order to organize my options, I started making a spreadsheet of shelters and rescues that were accessible to me by Uber because I don't have a car. I was living on a grad student stipend plus whatever extra income I could get by taking on short-term gigs. And I was living with a partner in a high-rise apartment building really close to downtown Philly. We didn't have that much grass near us, but there was a park a little over a mile away where a lot of other people and their dogs met up every day. So I'm in 2020, I'm in Philadelphia. I'm putting together this little spreadsheet of options, and I'm taking notes of all the adoption requirements in some of these places. One place required an application, a phone interview, personal and/or veterinary references, and a home check. Others asked whether I rented or owned, what kind of home I lived in, whether my yard was fenced, if I had a pool. One place wouldn't adopt to me at all because I didn't have a yard. One place required 4 to 6 months of a training program after adoption that was somewhat subsidized, but not fully funded. Another place had something called a highly adoptable fee. So as I'm doing my research, I'm assuming that all of these rules are only in place to ensure that the best possible outcomes for these animals. And I don't think about the really loving potential adopters like myself who might be priced out or excluded despite being capable and willing to provide a loving home to a pet at the time. And then I look at adoptable dogs in my area. I see dogs of all sizes, colors, ages, and breeds. One trend in particular that stands out to me, though, is that many of the dogs labeled American Pit Bull Terrier or Staffordshire Terrier have special photos, and they're wearing feather boas and tiaras, and they're named after flowers or other cutesy things. A 2020 study that you can see some of on the slide found that there were the negative consequences associated with having a racialized name for humans, including not getting callbacks for jobs, things like that, also carry over for dogs. So dogs with names that were more frequently perceived as white had the fastest time to adoption, whereas dogs with names that were typically perceived as Black had slower times for adoption, especially pit bull type dogs. So I'm starting to see some of these patterns, even though I don't yet have the context or the language to describe what I'm looking at. Anywho, all of it ended up not mattering because I walked into the Providence Animal Center on September 15th, 2020, just to look around, not prepared to go home with anyone. And I walked out with Ginger Douglas Jones, who was named Veronica at the time. But we scratched that. The structure of her name is built after my favorite Harlem Renaissance poet, Georgia Douglas Johnson. It was just fitting. I had 2 out of 3 of the initials. She had to have Douglas in there. Now, if I were to pluck us again from Philadelphia to Prince George's County, Maryland that same year, we may not have gotten such a happy ending. PG County enacted a Pit Bull Terrier ban in 1997 that actually covered Staffordshire Bull Terrier, American Staffordshire Terrier, American Pit Bull Terrier, and any dog that, quote, exhibits the physical characteristics of a Pit Bull Terrier more than any other breed of dog, end quote. Again, this is a law that threatens the lives of dogs based solely on visual identification, which is notoriously unreliable. And several studies have found that breed-specific legislation is not a very effective tool for reducing a place's dog bite incident. So still, in another world, in another timeline, The year is 2020. I'm a PG County resident, ready to become a dog mom. And I'm scrolling past most of the adoptable dogs in my area because if I do adopt them, I could get fined and they could get destroyed. So again, I find myself at home on my couch. Well, for the next vignette, we're moving into 2014. Hypothetical. Ginger and I are living together in East Garfield Park, Chicago, in a majority Black neighborhood where the poverty rate approaches 50%. Ginger and I lead a decent life in that she's fed and she's housed. I've fallen behind on her vet appointments, not only because of the cost, but because the nearest vet is not in this neighborhood. And neither are the big name pet stores. And our public transportation doesn't allow dogs larger than what can fit under the seat or in a bag in your lap. So I have to take an Uber to try to get a ride from someone, which means either more money or longer waits for Ginger to get what she needs. In this map, you can see Chicago's racial demographics in 2014 compared to its leash law citations. And then if we look at another map of dog parks in the city of Chicago, we can see that if I, an East Garfield Park resident, just toward the middle of the map there, if I want Ginger to have legal off-leash time, I have to try to get her at least 2 miles to the nearest dog park if I want to avoid a $500 ticket. If I don't have a car, that means I'm walking 4 miles total so that she can have safe off-leash time. Because she can't fit under anything because she's almost 80 pounds. Despite making up only 17% of the city, Black people made up 60% of arrests for animal crimes in Chicago between 2003 and 2013. Sociologist Carrie B. Birchfield in 2016 found that, quote, arrest for animal crimes was far more likely in community areas with higher hardship indices, end quote, which just happened to be the areas, the greatest percentages of Black folks. Again, even if the same crime took place, residents from certain neighborhoods were more likely to get arrested than residents of other neighborhoods. So irresponsible dog parenting is being enforced differently depending on your race and class, which in the US, a country built on racial capitalism, is very closely related to one's race. And this division of peoples was intentional. Chicago is one of the most redlined cities in the United States. And redlining refers to the practice of denying mortgages and credit to people from unfavorable neighborhoods, which are often the neighborhoods where Black people live. The term comes from the 1930s, during which the Homeowners Loan Corporation and later the Federal Housing Authority created color-coded maps to indicate where the favorable borrowers lived. On a scale from grade A to grade D, majority Black neighborhoods almost always receive the hazardous rating. And in this map from the late 1830s, you can see East Garfield Park toward the right there. And as you continue going right, the map gets redder and redder until you get along the shore, which is now the highest income area in Chicago. And that's favorable again. There are almost no Black people living there, but it's favorable. And that's part of why it's favorable. So the original language from the HOCL map talks about keeping neighborhoods, quote, free of Black folks. And 40 years later, that language shifted to keeping neighborhoods, quote, free of pit bulls. So de jure or legal residential segregation was outlawed in 1968 by the Federal Housing Act. And less than 10 years later, wealthier and whiter neighborhoods in Chicago are starting to push for heavier breed-specific legislation. And they're targeting breeds that are considered dangerous, but are also heavily racialized and associated with Black folks. So we have the same effect, even though it's not legal to say that you're denying a mortgage because of a certain demographic. You can now exclude big groups of people from the areas you want to exclude them from using breed-specific legislation. And I'm not saying that that is the only reason why breed-specific legislation popped up. I'm just saying it's one factor. So in 2014, Ginger and I are living in the legacy of that history. Chicago is still extremely segregated. I statistically have less access to high quality care for Ginger, high quality food, high quality housing, green space, and everything else. But nevertheless, I have no less love in my heart for her. It's just hard to express that because of limited resources, limited access. Going back further, now Ginger and I are in Harlem in the year 1996. Our relationship looks a little different. I'm still very fond of her, but I wasn't raised to see dogs purely as pets. I grew up believing that dogs need jobs. Ginger is a guard dog that I got from a kennel that popped up in the booming guard dog business in the late 1960s, early 1970s. Most guard dogs are Dobermans and German Shepherds, but Ginger seems sizable and trainable and cheap, so I get her. Lots of families in my neighborhood and other environments have taken up guard dogs because my community is really underfunded, under-resourced, prompting many folks to do what they feel like they have to do to survive, including crime. Cops don't come to this part of town. If I do need help, I'm more likely to get it from the community and my trusty companion than a police officer. And in that way, Ginger and the other guard dogs are part of my community. They're part of the unit that keeps me safe and comfortable. I have a respect for them and a duty to look out for them as well. That's not considered, it's not what many people typically consider a loving relationship anymore, even though there is love there. Even though they used to be seen as all-American dogs, by now pit bulls are pretty widely hated in the United States. They have a reputation as fighting dogs, but I judge the people involved more than I judge the dogs. For a while, the bad dogs were the German Shepherds and Dobermans. The most hated dog breed changes over time, but the pit bull hate, it doesn't really seem like it's going anywhere anytime soon. It's very persistent. And one of the reasons that I think it's so persistent is because of how racialized and associated with Black pit bull. So all throughout the 1980s, the media is promoting how terrible pit bulls are. I'm reading story after story about mauling after mauling, all pinned on one breed. That's actually a umbrella term for any dog with particular characteristics. And I'm used to seeing sensational headlines about violent pit bull attacks and fear-mongering op-eds about how dangerous they are. And I remember seeing similar headlines about myself, my family, and people who look like me. And I'm skeptical about trusting everything I read about pit bulls because of that fact. Even the language is similar. Newspapers are writing about Black folks infesting neighborhoods, and then decades later talking about pit bulls infesting neighborhoods. It's mirrored. And in that way, our stories are in alignment. Not the same story, but they're related very closely. They parallel each other. But back to Harlem, 1996. So my family is pretty wary of Ginger, not knowing exactly what breed she is, and everyone has their own reasons for feeling what they feel. I knew I wanted a bully-looking dog because I'm a big fan of hip-hop, and pit bulls have become a status symbol of the genre. They're tough, they're lawless, they're feared. In a time when many Black Americans are tired of feeling othered and criminalized, having a pit bull feels like a reclamation. Dogfighting has also become more popular in my area as both a quick way to make money and a way to assert one's masculinity, which means a lot to the politically powerless. And I hate the cruelty of dogfighting, and I hate the stigma that the dogs get left with. And I hate the fact that so many people feel like that is their best option. My mom, in this hypothetical scenario, is not a fan of any large dogs. She remembers as a child seeing those pictures from protests in Birmingham, Alabama in the 1960s, when police forces used dogs to restrain and attack those who were fighting for civil rights. Though Baltimore's Canine Unit program, the first in the country, only launched in 1956, by 1963, police departments across the country began using dogs regularly for crowd control, which happened to be primarily crowds made up of Black folks. So my mom's fear of dog is partially earned by what she saw, but it's also learned by her parents, learned from their parents that dogs have always been used to control Black bodies in this country, but we're going to get to that soon. And they have always been used as tools against Black liberation. And even in the 21st century, they're still being used as tools for anti-Black violence. The 2015 Ferguson report, which was written in the wake of the murder of Mike Brown in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014, found that the Ferguson Police Department engages in a pattern of deploying canines to bite individuals when the articulated facts do not justify this significant use of force. The department's own records demonstrate that, as with other types of force, canine officers use dogs out of proportion to the threat posed by the people they encounter, leaving serious wounds to nonviolent offenders, some of them children. Furthermore, in every canine bite incident for which racial information is available, the subject is African American. Every case, 100%. The same goes for the Los Angeles Police Department, 100%. And the stats are similarly high for canine units all across the country. So there's a fear of dogs that gets passed down generationally and then is reinforced by these new threats that use dogs as weapons against Black folks in the US. And in that way, the dogs that I see in rap videos in the 1990s are another kind of reclamation. This time, Black folks have the power, they have the control, the threat is in their hands instead of being aimed at them. And while 2025 Kassidi can see how that's problematic for any culture to use dogs as tools for violence instead of seeing them as individuals with great capacities for love, 1996 Kassidi thinks that the dogs on TV are cool. Dogs in the music videos are cool. She wants to emulate that. And in some ways, I begin to break a generational curse or a generational fear of dogs that's passed down through stories and through blood, which again, that fear is warranted, but it no longer serves us. Now going back even further, Ginger and I are together in 1856 in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is where a lot of my family is from. My family is free, but that's a recent development. Before that, my father was enslaved on a plantation not far from where we live now. He grew up with dogs, but again, those dogs all had jobs. He found himself working alongside them. When permitted, he used those dogs to hunt, not only to provide more food for the family, but also to provide a little bit of income from meat and pelts. As such, hunting was outlawed for some enslaved people, especially hunting with guns or dogs. When my father, in this example, was made to compete against enslavers' dogs for food scraps, he felt dehumanized, small. When he commanded his own dog out on the hunt, he felt like a man and like part of a team. As such, I come from a family that really values dogs and what they mean for us. They say about who we are. There are many other families, however, who do not feel the same because this is a time when dogs are also frequently used to apprehend those who have escaped enslavement. Negro dogs, as they were sometimes called, were advertised in newspapers for being fastest and the most persistent. With the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850, which required those who fled enslavement and reached free land to be returned back to the people that were enslaving them, the market for Negro dogs skyrocketed. These dogs, which are often some kind of Cuban bloodhound or another hound, could be used to recover lost property. And they're trained to pursue and to hate Black folks through cruel training practices like making enslaved people antagonize chained dogs and then run away, teaching the dog to pursue them. And we know that that's true because of narratives written by enslaved people like Isaac Williams' narrative, Aunt Sally, published in 1858, which reads, quote, "Sabbath afternoon was the favorite time for training dogs to hunt Negroes. When not in use, the dogs were always kept chained, and no colored person was allowed to speak to them or to feed them under penalty of a severe whipping. At training times, the dogs were let loose and put on track of a little Negro boy who was made to climb a tree," end quote. But even Frederick Douglass records similar events. Black folks and dogs in this country were set up to be enemies, or at the very least, strangers. The Frederick Douglass example is particularly important to me, considering one, what a famous figure he was, but two, I think throughout his different narratives and speeches, you get a full range of experiences with Black folks and dogs, because there's a speech where he describes fighting his enslaver's dog, not fighting his enslaver's dog, but like competing with his enslaver's dog for table scraps at the end of a meal, and being on his hands and knees and trying to edge out the dog so that he could. And then he also has a speech telling the story of not him, but people he knows being made to beat or whip dogs and then run as part of their training process, to use them as tools for anti-Black violence. So even prominent figures like Frederick Douglass are experiencing similar things. He's not protected by, he's not safe from the ongoing practice of pitting Black folks and dogs against each other. I struggled picking a state for that vignette because there are so many places in the US where it was illegal for Ginger and I to be together in the mid-19th century. I am generationally not that far removed from slavery, and even my great-grandfather did sharecropping. But all across the South, I could have encountered laws that read like this. In Maryland, 1856, no Negro shall keep any dog without a license from a justice of the peace, and but one with such license, and any person may kill any dog kept contrary to this section. The license aforesaid to be enforced for 1 year only, but may be renewed. So you can see that the roots of Maryland's non-racial dog licensing laws have a racial background. And it's important for us to think about that in the 21st century, how these rules that we are repeating and enforcing have these ugly histories, and what else might we be repeating by not reevaluating them for a 21st century context. This is a really long law from South Carolina, which had so many. They repeated this year after year for over 40 years. But the first one on the books for South Carolina says that it shall not be, quote, that it shall not be lawful for any Negro, mulatto, Negroes, or persons of color, which, stepping out of the quote for a minute, I keep preaching this in the 21st century, but person of color, people of color is just as old as Negro and mulatto, and was used interchangeably at the time. And it's not, I don't know how it became the progressive term in the 2010s, because its history is the same. Anyways, and each and every one of them are hereby prohibited from having or keeping any dog, whatever, in any yard, lot, or enclosure, either public or private within the city, unless such dog be well secured so as to do and cause no damage or injury in the daytime, and also have fixed round the neck a collar with the name of some creditable white person engraved thereon, which said white person shall be considered as the owner of the dog and shall be held responsible and liable for any damage or injury that may be committed by such dog. And in case any slave shall have in possession any dog contrary to the condition above expressed, the said slave shall be liable to and shall, by order of one or more of the wardens of the city, receive at the workhouse a correction not exceeding 20 lashes, unless the owner of said slave shall pay the sum of $5 to the informer, end quote. And there are laws like this in Alabama, Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi, Tennessee, Virginia, and DC that I found so far. If you want to take a look at more of those, there's a link on my website under the resources tab to a spreadsheet I have. I really like spreadsheets. A spreadsheet I have called Dog Law Database, where I went through, and I don't know why I had this much time on my hands, but I went through these 200 and 300-year-old legislative books for every state, just to see what I can find. And I didn't read every book, so I didn't catch every law, but got a lot of them. And there are also tools there to get you started if you want to take a look at what some of the laws in your state look like. But the earliest one I can find is from 1752, so 100 years before this Raleigh vignette we have. The act for preserving the breed of sheep from the statutes at large being a collection of all the laws of Virginia, 1752. So the United States wasn't even an independent nation yet, and already we're setting up this divide between Black folks and dogs. It's one of the first things we get done. Since before the US was the US, Black folks and dogs have been deliberately kept apart. And there's something really violent about withholding the love and companionship and utility of dogs from an entire people. But before all of that, for the United States, before the Middle Passage, before enslavement, there was a life in West Africa. In my research for my dissertation, I proposed that some of what helped Black folks in the United States maintain positive associations with nature, despite their terrible encounters with nature in America, was that enslavement transported not only African bodies, but also African cosmologies and ethics. To quote from my dissertation, an amalgam of African cosmologies articulate anti-colonial approaches to the environment and speak to a spirit of interconnectedness between all living things in a given ecosystem. As such, in another world, in another timeline, Ginger and I are in Ghana, sharing soil, sharing the sea. She has a job, and so do I. She provides for me, and I her. And we see ourselves in each other, and we treat each other as such. The point with which I would hope you all walk away is that there are a million reasons why Ginger and I have each other, but we couldn't have each other. There are a million forces working against us. Decade after decade, century after century, state after state, and city after city, there have been these forces at play that would prefer to keep us apart, namely white supremacy and colonialism. And there's a reason why, in her reading of Harriet Wilson's novel Arnig, Benedict Foiseron, the author of Afro Dog, Blackness and the Animal Question, comes to the conclusion that, quote, canine companionship is a white privilege. In many ways, it has been. In some ways, it still is. When we see shelters that will only adopt out to certain zip codes but ban certain others, are we not witnessing redlining and animal welfare? When we promote canine units and share feel-good stories about cop dogs, are we not celebrating a long legacy of anti-Black violence that spans hundreds of years? When we judge someone of a different race or culture for not being a big fan of dogs, or for having a different relationship to their dog, are we not ignoring the years and years of conditioning that may have led to such a divide or discrepancy? The relationship that I have with Ginger should be, for all intents and purposes, impossible. And yet, we're here, loving each other very much, absolutely getting on each other's nerves, but being a family at the end of the day. As leaders in the animal welfare community and vocal and active animal advocates, it's our responsibility to figure out the barriers in place that may be preventing more people like me from finding their Gingers. We need to be advocating for the kinds of programs that help people meet their own needs so that they can meet the needs of the animals they want. From supporting living wages for all to advocating for more dog parks and clinics in low income and or predominantly Black areas. We need to be doing outreach and education to dispel living myths and stereotypes about certain breeds, especially racialized breeds, and to overwrite and correct histories of dogs being used as tools for anti-Black violence so we can start to repair some of those relationships. We need to commit to having these difficult conversations openly, even when it's not trending, even when the algorithm would punish you for it. And most importantly, we have to remember that our shared goal of placing as many animals as possible in safe and loving homes cannot happen without other humans. So we should be a little bit kinder to them too. Because there's a timeline out there wherein I felt discouraged or intimidated by all of the adoption requirements at my local shelters. The timeline wherein I never wanted a dog in the first place because my mom was afraid of them, her parents were afraid because their parents were afraid. The timeline where Philly enacted a breed ban that meant Ginger would never make it out of the shelter at all. When I think of all those other possibilities, I'm really grateful to be here and now. Thank you all for listening, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Cassidy. That was absolutely amazing. The flow was perfect. I know you said this was new. I think it went really well. And according to the chat, many people did as well. So thank you so much. We have about 5 minutes for questions, and it looks like we have 3 popped into the chat, 3 or 4. Someone asked, when you specifically talk about animal crimes, what type of crimes are you speaking towards?
That map in particular was about leash law violations, which makes sense because if there are no safe off-leash spaces near you, you're going to have more spaces to get these citations. You don't have another option presented to you easily.
Yeah.
You violate. And even though those violations are also happening in other neighborhoods, wealthier neighborhoods, brighter neighborhoods, those folks are not receiving the citations and tickets. Um, I believe there's another recent study that includes more violent crimes. Um, I don't have the numbers from that one, but I'm going to send the slides and some links to things that I mentioned to the Maddie's Fund folks. So, oh, there's what's it called?
The
Where I'm
drive,
responding.
the forum.
There's a forum. I can put the names of things and links to things in the forum.
Thank you. Yeah, so everyone we have the QR code and everything that'll pop up, but you can definitely connect with Cassidy on the forum, as well as her social media and stuff has been posted as well. Our next question is, what is Ginger's favorite place?
Ginger's favorite place. I think Ginger's favorite place is where I just got up from in my bed. I can't be there. She gets too hot if I'm in there, but after I get up in the morning, she puts herself right in that place. And don't let me leave pajamas. Then she's putting her face all in my pajamas. She's having the time of her life. So
That's perfect. That's so much love. I love that. Um, okay, and then another question is, since a lot of these colonial sorry, let me start over. Since a lot of these colonial tactics still exist today, but they've just evolved, how can we get folks that refuse to even acknowledge colonialism as an ongoing process to understand these legacies?
that's a really good question. I found that when I meet folks who are stubborn in that particular way, that I have to back things up with stats and cite my sources. And even citing my sources doesn't help. A story that I tell a lot is I had posted something about pit bulls and I did cite everything. There's a slide that said sources and MLA format because I'm a scholar at heart. And somebody commented, where are your sources for these claims? And I said, they're on the slide labeled sources. And they said, those aren't sources, those are books. And that's a fight you can't win. I had to end that argument there. We're operating from a fundamentally different place. But I think really great studies are coming out now. Maddie's Fund is supporting really great studies that's getting us this empirical data, which I think is going to be really great in our arsenal for when we're trying to combat the more stubborn ones.
Thank you. Okay, so we're coming up right on time. So, what is one way that the people on this call can support the cause you spoke about today, as well as you and Ginger?
Feel free to follow me at Ginger Snaps. I haven't been posting there lately for real, but one day I will be posting again, and you don't want to miss it, huh? And then my email is info@gingers-naps.com if you want to follow up. But yeah, I mostly do this for the love of the game, and to keep the conversation going because it's really important to me. It's not my main job. I'm at my main job right now, actually. Um, but yeah, the fact that people are even interested in talking about these things excites me so much that I still do it. This is supporting me, showing up to things like this, promoting events like this, attending events like this, holding events like this. Big support for me.
Okay. Well, thank you, Cassidy, for joining us on this wonderful Juneteenth. For those that aren't aware, today is Juneteenth. It's the holiday of the last slaves in Galveston, Texas, getting notification that, 2 years prior, they had actually been declared as free. So do some research on that as well if you'd like to learn more about it. And Lucy, any closing statements, final words?
Yeah, I'm always just, in awe when people are just doing so much a beautiful work and you don't realize it because we're always in our day-to-day rut and you kind of look outside of yourself and so thank you so much for highlighting this and it's a lack of awareness. We all have our own bubbles and our own experiences, so it's so wonderful to hear from different stories and different backgrounds and it's just to kind of give us a different perspective and so hopefully that makes some of us do some homework and kind of look inward and just be better, right? Be better human beings. And what animal ideal homes and lives look like, that are outside of our bubbles. And so thank you so much for doing this wonderful, impactful work and showing up and doing the damn thing. So thank you very much.
And thank
Yeah,
you
thank
everyone
you
for
for having me.
joining us today. Again, the QR code is on the screen. Feel free to screenshot that or just join us over on the forum where Cassidy will be continuing the conversation. And if we did not get to your question today, we will carry those over to the forum as well. But also, if you think of some questions like me, it's 3 a.m., I'm laying in the bed and I'm like, dang, why didn't I ask that? Go ahead and post those on there as well. So I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their holiday and we hope to see you next time.